And so, the birth of JavaScript modules happened kind of around this early period thanks to Node.js. Who uses Node.js? We all use it every day. If you're using Webpack, you're using Node. You rely on Node. Node is the canonical, you will find, and maybe I know some .NET people don't like hearing this, but if you want to build a canonical web application, be prepared to install Node. It is foundational for not only how we get packages, how we share packages, how we run our tools, our linters, our commands. And so Node.js, you have a problem here. Node is JavaScript that runs on the server, right? They took the V8 engine and shoved it in a binary and gave it a runtime for the server side. But how do you load JavaScript if there's no DOM, right? How do you add a script tag if there is no HTML in Node, right? So that was the issue. And that is when the birth of CommonJS came about. And so what you'll see here is just a little example where you have 3 separate files, and to be able to actually include other files, they created the CommonJS module format. They use a syntax called require, which allows you to inject other pieces of a module into the current module. So in here we see I just broke it up into 3 separate files, but we have division.js, and so the syntax is used for CommonJS. You can have a default export or you can have named exports. And so we're looking at a default export here, which allows you to, and the syntax is module.exports. And it's just a function that takes 2 arguments and returns the division for it, or the modulus. I can't remember which one that is. And then we have another file here that's pulling in division. And you can see, since it's just a default export, we can name it whatever the heck we want. And this module is defining some named exports. So this is saying exports.add, exports.subtract, exports.divide. And so that is this module's way of providing that scope or those values to another file if it wants to request it. So if we go up to our index.js here, we're actually pulling in these named exports, which all just get put under an object called the default export, and get required. And then this way, so now we've just solved some scope. We just solved scope here without ifs or anything. We now can pull in pieces of values, assign them to variables in a different module without having problems with scope or anything like that. It actually kind of gave us a little static analysis, right? We can tell right here exactly what is used for the most part. This is when the explosion of JavaScript starts. You may hear me say, JavaScript is taking over the world as a programming language, as a platform, as a way to rapidly develop and create fast-running applications. When you look, and it still boggles me today, how new programming languages that get created don't adopt these models. But you think about it, there is NPM. It is so easy to ship whatever module you want. And so NPM was created as a package registry to be able to share CommonJS Node modules across an entire ecosystem, a registry. And it's super easy to get started. NPM install whatever the heck I want. And so the hyper mass distribution, everybody's starting to write all of their tools, all of their scripts, all of their utilities in JavaScript on Node. And the module system really caused this Precambrian just explosion of the evolving ecosystem. And even today it's even faster. But what are these problems? There's still problems here. There is no browser support for CommonJS. You can't just go write a CommonJS module and load it in the browser. There's no live bindings, and this is specifically with circular references. So as more modules started to be created and the ecosystem keeps rapidly developing, we start finding out people are using modules in very interesting ways, and trying to self-refer and having cyclical dependencies and things like that. And this really starts to show itself through CommonJS. And the resolution algorithm for CommonJS is kind of slow. It's really slow. And it's built into Node, but it's still really, really slow because it's synchronous. Oh, by the way, did I say there's no browser support for CommonJS? Was there a solution? I mean, so you'll start noticing that also people started wanting to ship their web modules through NPM. Like NPM was this huge instant, like think of the time when you were writing web development 3 years ago. It was like you had to go to a CDN or a GitHub distro, pull something down, concatenate it together. And to a lot of people that was unacceptable, like especially those who were using Node. They're like, why don't we just ship these libraries out of Node.js, right, or NPM? And so people started doing that, but they would find out like, oh crap, this CommonJS doesn't work. And so this is when bundlers and linkers were like really starting to take up popularity. Who's heard of Browserify? Yeah. Who's heard of modules webmake? No, it's not very popular, but you'll find out why it's super important. But like these bundlers started to be created. What they do, like their main premise is to allow you to write CommonJS modules, but then it get bundled and stripping those statements and then executed in the same order so that it works in the web exactly as it might work, you know, or you would expect it to work in your code. And we also started to see different approaches like loaders or you know, things that like JavaScript that executes in the browser that's responsible for going in dynamically or in real time fetching different module formats. But there's also problems with this. You know, CommonJS is, you know, when you look at it here, it doesn't look too harmful. But the problem is that require is actually a function that you can pass anywhere. And so we started seeing people abuse the crap out of CommonJS syntax. Like, I love Cindersaurus. Does anybody know who Cindersaurus is? Like, he's probably the author of every, like, you use a package that he wrote, like, for sure. He's responsible for 300 billion downloads a year on an NPM or a month. I can't remember what it is. It's a staggering amount. But he writes these tiny packages. He'll write ones, though, that, like, take require and you pass a require function in and then you call it a different require. And there's no way for bundlers to be able to statically analyze this stuff. Like, we can't know without evaluating the code what's happening with this function. And so you end up with a lot of problems with getting really bloated bundles. And then there's no support for like lazy loading in the way that we would expect. Require, sure, it is kind of dynamic, but there's no way to like asynchronously load something, especially for the web. And like I said, CommonJS is just too dynamic of a module format to be able to have really like optimized code. And then the scary thing was not everybody was shipping CommonJS. Like we had AMD, which cropped up. So who's seen the AMD module pattern? You can thank Dojo for that, I think, or I think it came out of Dojo. Even like we got some libraries at Microsoft who use AMD today, and it just kills me. Who has like tried to bundle Moment.js with Webpack and noticed they end up with like 3 billion megabytes of code? That's because they're using AMD and they're doing it too dynamic. They're using like some dynamic capabilities of AMD that cause you to pull in every locale. Like if Moment was just shipped in ESM, you wouldn't have any issues. But with legacy code, we all struggle with legacy things. Even Monaco and VS Code is written entirely in AMD. And like one of the things I'm working on right now with them is trying to push them as far away as possible from using AMD anymore. And so this is also like a design pattern that Angular kind of took. They're like, we want dependency injection. And this was before modules were a thing, right? And so it seemed like a good idea. And then there's also AMD plus CommonJS. Like this is a thing. I would never write this, but I mean, I've seen it done before. But there's problems. Like it's too dynamic. The Moment.js, scenario. And it's more than just that. If you try to run the Monaco editor, which is like, so it's what gives you the VS Code like IDE experience. Like Basically, Code Sandbox and Stack Blitz basically just took Monaco Editor and threw it up in a browser where it originally started to it's the same thing. But you'll find out very quickly that that's like 5 megs of code, like if you tried to bundle it. And the syntax is really awkward. It's non-standard, not even Node, nor the browser supports it. So it's not even a real module system.